Hello again. This one is especially for Alya. And it's not about Vikings. I bet it might be a story that you heard before. But let's try again. Have you heard of the White Rabbit? Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Alice. And she had a very curious dream. Would you like to hear what it was that she dreamt about? Well, this was the first thing that happened. A white rabbit came running by in a great hurry, and just as it passed Alice, it stopped and looked at its watch. No, he didn't have a watch on his arm. He had it in his pocket. Wasn't that the funny thing? Did you ever see a rabbit that had a watch and a pocket to put it in? Of course, when a rabbit has a watch, it must have a pocket to put it in. It would never do to carry it about in its mouth. And it wants its hands sometimes, so run about it. Hasn't it got pretty pink eyes? I think all white rabbit has pink eyes. And pink ears. And a nice brown coat. Coat. And you can just see its red pocket handkerchief peeping out of its coat pocket. And that, with its blue necktie and its yellow waistcoat, it really is very nicely dressed. Oh dear, said the rabbit. I shall be too late. What would it be too late for, I wonder? Well, you see, it had to go and visit the Duchess. You'll see a picture of the Duchess soon, sitting in her kitchen. And the Duchess was a very cross old lady, and the rabbit knew she would be very angry indeed if he kept her waiting. So the poor thing was as frightened could be. Don't you see how he's trembling? Just shake the book a little bit. From side to side. And you'll see him tremble because he thought the Duchess would have his head cut off for a punishment. That was what the Queen of Hearts used to do when she was angry with people. See, there he is. And very shaky because he was afraid. Yes. I'll show you a picture of her soon too. At least she used to order their heads to be cut off, and she always thought it was done, though they never really did it. And so when the white rabbit ran away, Alice wanted to see what would happen to it. So she ran after it. And she ran, until she tumbled right down the rabbit hole. And so when the white rabbit ran away, Alice wanted to see what would happen to it. So she ran after it, and she ran. After she fell down the rabbit hole, she had a very long fall indeed, down and down and down, till she began to wonder if she was going right through the world, so as to come out on the other side. It was just like a very deep well, only there was no water in it. If anybody really had such a fall as that, it would kill them, most likely. But you know, it doesn't hurt a bit to fall in a dream, because all the time you think you're falling, you really are lying somewhere safe and sound and fast asleep. However, this terrible fall came to an end at last, and down came Alice on a heap of sticks and dry leaves. But she wasn't a bit hurt, and up she jumped and ran after the rabbit again. And so that was the beginning of Alice's curious dream. And next time you see a white rabbit, try and fancy you're going to have a curious dream, just like dear little Alice. And so, after Alice has tumbled down the rabbit hole and had run a long way underground, all of a sudden she found herself in a great hall with doors all around it. But all the doors were locked. So you see, poor Alice couldn't get out of the hall, and that made her very sad. However, after a little while, she came to a little table, all made of glass, with 3 legs. There are 2 of the legs in the picture, I'll show you soon, and just the beginning of the other leg. So you see, and on the table was a little key, and she went round the hall and tried if she could unlock any of the doors with it. Here you see Alice standing with that leg, 3-legged table. Yes. Let's see what's happening. She found the key. She tried the key in every door around the hall. Poor Alice. The key wouldn't unlock any of the doors. But at last she came upon a tiny little door. And oh, how glad she was when they found the key would fit it. So she unlocked the tiny little door, and she stooped down and looked through it. And what do you think she saw? Oh, such a beautiful garden. And she did so long to go in it. But the door was too small. She couldn't squeeze herself through any more than you could squeeze yourself into a mouse hole. So poor little Alice locked up the door, took the key back to the table again, and this time she found quite the new thing on it. Now, look at the picture again, and what do you think it was? It was a tiny little bottle. Tiny little bottle. So, it had a label on it, which had 2 words on it. "Drink me," said the label. So she tasted it, and it was very nice. So she set to work and drank it up all. And then such a curious thing happened to her. You'll never guess what it was. So I shall have to tell you. She got smaller and smaller and smaller, till at last she was just the size of a little doll. Then she said to herself, "Now I'm the right size to get through that little door." And away she ran, but when she got there, the door was locked, and the key was on the top of the table, and she couldn't reach it because she was so little. Wasn't it a pity she had locked up the door again? Well, the next thing she found was a little cake, and it had the words, "Eat me," marked on it. So of course she set to work and ate it up. And then what do you think happened? No, you'll never guess. I will have to tell you again. She grew, and she grew, and she grew, taller than she was before, taller than any child, taller than any grown-up person, taller and taller and taller. Just look at the picture and you'll see how tall she got. Which would you have liked the best, do you think? To be a little tiny Alice or Alya? No larger than a kitten? Or a great tall Alice with your head always knocking against the ceiling? Perhaps you think Alice must have been very much pleased when she had eaten the little cake to find herself growing so tremendously tall, because of course it would be easy enough now to reach the little key of the glass table and to open the little tiny hall door. Well, of course she could do that, but what good was it to get the door open when she couldn't get through? She was worse off than ever, poor thing. She could just manage by getting her head down close to the ground to look through with one eye. But that was all she could do. No wonder the poor tall child sat down and cried as if her heart would break. So she cried and she cried. All her tears ran down the middle of the hall like a deep river. And very soon there was quite a large pool of tears reaching halfway down the hall. And there she might have stayed till this very day if the White Rabbit hadn't happened to come through the hall on his way to visit the Duchess. He was dressed up as grand could be, and he had a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a little fan in the other. And he kept on muttering to himself, "Oh, the Duchess, the Duchess. Oh, won't she be savage if I've kept her waiting?" But she didn't see Alice. He didn't see Alice, you know. So when she began to say, "If you please, sir," her voice seemed to come from the top of the hall because her head was so high up. And the rabbit was dreadfully frightened, and he dropped the gloves and the fan and ran away as hard as he could go. Then a very curious thing indeed happened. Alice took up the fan and began to fan herself with it. And lo and behold, she got quite small again. And all in a minute, she was just about the size of a mouse. Look at the picture. Can you see? You'll soon guess what happened next. It looks just like the sea, doesn't it? But it really is the pool of tears, all made of Alice's tears, you know. And Alice has tumbled into the pool, and the mouse had tumbled in, and there they are, swimming about together. Don't Alice look pretty as she swims across the picture? You can just see her blue stockings far away under the water. But why is the mouse swimming away from Alice in such a hurry? Well, the reason is that Alice began talking about cats and dogs. And the mouse always hates talking about cats and dogs. Suppose you were swimming about in a pool of your own tears, and suppose somebody began talking to you about lesson books and bottles of medicine. Wouldn't you swim away as hard as you could too? Yes. Then, when Alice and the mouse had got out of the pool of tears, of course they were very wet, and so were a lot of other curious creatures that had tumbled in as well. There was a dodo. That's the great bird in front leaning on a walking stick. And the duck. And the lory. That's just behind the duck, looking over its head. And an eaglet. That's on the left-hand side of the lorry. And several others. Well, you can have a look at them. Well, and so they didn't know how in the world they were to get dry again. But the dodo, who was a very wise bird, told them the right way was to have a caucus race. And what do you think that was? You don't know? Well, you are an ignorant child. Now be very attentive, and I'll soon cure you of your ignorance. First, you must have a race course. It ought to be a sort of circle, but it doesn't much matter what shape it is, as long as it goes a good way round and joins on to itself again. Then you must put all the racers on the course, here and there, it doesn't matter where, as long as you don't crowd them too much together. Then you needn't say 1, 2, 3 and away. Now, but let them all set off running just when they like and leave off just when they like. So all these creatures, Alice and all, went on running round and around and around until they were all quite dry again. Then the dodo said, everybody had won and everybody must have prizes. Of course, Alice had to give them their prizes, and she had nothing to give but the few comfits she happened to have in her pocket. And there was just one apiece all around, and there was no prize for Alice. So what do you think they did? Alice had nothing left but her thimble. Now look at the picture and you'll see what happened. Hand it over here, said the dodo. Then the dodo took the thimble and handed it back to Alice and said, we beg your acceptance for this elegant thimble. And then all the other creatures cheered. Wasn't that a curious sort of present to give her? Suppose they wanted to give you a birthday present. Would you rather they should go to your toy cupboard and pick out your nicest doll and say, here, my love, here's a lovely birthday present for you? Or would you like them to give you something new, something that didn't belong to you before? Well, I'll tell you about Alice's adventures in the White Rabbit's house now. Do you remember how the rabbit dropped his gloves in his fan when he was so frightened of hearing Alice's voice that seemed to come down from the sky? Well, of course he couldn't go to visit the Duchess without his gloves and his fan. So after a bit he came back again to look for them. By this time the dodo and all the other curious creatures had gone away, and Alice was wandering about alone. So what do you think she did? Actually, she thought she was his housemaid, and she began ordering her about. He thought she was. Marianne, he said, go home this very minute and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now. Perhaps he couldn't see very clearly with his pink eyes, for I'm sure Alice doesn't look very like a housemaid, does she? However, she was a very good-natured little girl, so she wasn't a bit offended, but ran off to the rabbit's house as quick as she could. It was lucky she found the door open, for if she had had to ring, I suppose the real Mary Ann would have come to open the door, and she would never have let Alice come in. And I'm sure it was very lucky she didn't meet the real Mary Ann as she trotted upstairs, for I'm afraid she would have taken Alice for a robber. So at last she found her way into the rabbit's room, and there was a pair of gloves lying on the table, and she was just going to take them up and go away when she happened to see a little bottle on the table. And of course it had the words, "Drink me," on the label. And of course Alice drank some. Well, I think that was rather lucky too, don't you? For if she hadn't drunk any, all this wonderful adventure that I'm going to tell you about wouldn't have happened at all. And wouldn't that have been pity? You're getting so used to Alice's adventures now that I dare say you can guess what happened next. If you can't, I'll tell you. She grew, and she grew, and she grew. And in a very short time the room was full of Alice's, just in the same way as a jar was full of jam. There was Alice all the way up to the ceiling, and Alice in every corner of the room. The door opened inwards, so of course there wasn't any room to open it. So when the rabbit got tired of waiting and came to fetch his gloves for himself, of course he couldn't get in. So what do you think he did? Now we come to the picture. He sent Bill the lizard. There you see him. And the lizard went up to the roof of the house and told him to get down the chimney, but Alice happened to have one of her feet in the fireplace. So when she heard Bill coming down the chimney, she just gave a little tiny kick, and away went Bill, flying up into the sky. Poor little Bill. Don't you pity him very much? How frightened he must have been. Well, it doesn't look such a very little puppy, does it? Well, how can you know? You haven't seen it. I'll show it to you then. Look at that. And that's supposed to be a little puppy. It looks scared though. Well, it doesn't look such a very little puppy, does it? But then you see Alice had grown very small indeed. And that's what makes the puppy look so large. When Alice had eaten one of those little magic cakes that she found in the White Rabbit's house, it made her get quite small directly, so that she could get through the door, or else she could never have got out of the house again. Wouldn't that have been a pity? Because then she wouldn't have dreamed all the other curious things that we're going to tell you about. So it really was a little puppy, you see. And isn't it a little pet? And look at the way it's barking at the little stick that Alice is holding out for it. You can see she was a little afraid of it all the time because she got behind that great thistle for fear it should run over her. That would have been just about as bad for her as it would be for you to be run over by a wagon and 4 horses. Have you got a little pet puppy in your home? If you have, I hope you're always kind to it and give it nice things to eat. Once upon a time, I knew some little children about as big as you. And they had a little pet dog of their own, and it was called Dash. And this is what they told me about its birthday treat. Do you know, one day we remembered it was Dash's birthday that day, so we said, let's give Dash a nice birthday treat like what we have on our birthdays. So we thought, now what is it that we like best of all on our birthdays? And we thought, and at last we all called out together, why, it's oatmeal porridge, of course. So of course we thought Dash would be quite sure to like it very much too. So we went to the cook and we got her to make a saucerful of nice oatmeal porridge. Sorry. Then we called Dash into the house and we said, now Dash, you're going to have your birthday treat. We expected Dash would jump for joy, but it didn't, not one bit. So we put the saucer down before it and we said, now Dash, don't be greedy, eat it nicely like a good dog. So Dash just tasted it with the tip of its tongue. And then it made, oh, such a horrid face. Ugh. And then, do you know, it did hate it, so it wouldn't eat a bit more of it. So we had to put it all down its throat with a spoon. I wonder if Alice would give this little puppy some porridge. I don't think she can, because she hasn't got any with her. I can't see any saucer in the picture. One little chapter more, and we will have to say goodnight, because I'm tired. Would you like to know what happened to Alice after she had got away from the puppy? It was far too large an animal, you know, for her to play with. I don't suppose you would much enjoy playing with a young hippopotamus, would you? You would always be expecting to be crushed flat as a pancake under its great heavy feet. So Alice was very glad to run away, while it wasn't looking. Well, she wandered up and down and didn't know what in the world to do, to make herself grow up to her right size again. Of course, she knew that she had to eat or drink something. That was the regular rule, you know, but she couldn't guess what. However, can you see? She soon came to a great mushroom that was too tall that she couldn't see over the top of it without standing on tiptoe. And what do you think she saw? Something that I'm sure you never talked to in all your life. It was a large blue caterpillar. I'll tell you soon what Alice and the caterpillar talked about. But first, let us have a good look at the picture. Must make sure it's light on it. That curious thing standing in front of the caterpillar is called a hookah. Oh yeah, it's kind of a pipe. It's used for smoking. The smoke comes through that long tube that winds round and round like a serpent. And do you see its long nose and chin? At least they look exactly like a nose and chin, don't they? But they really are two of its legs. You know, a caterpillar has got quantities of legs. You can see some more of them further down. What the bother it must be to be a caterpillar counting over such a lot of legs every night to make sure it hasn't lost any of them. And another great bother must be having to settle which leg it had better move first. I think if you had 40 or 50 legs, and if you wanted to go a walk, you'd be such a time in settling which leg to begin with that you'd never go a walk at all. And what did Alice and the caterpillar talk about, I wonder? Well, Alice told it how very confusing it was being first one size and then another. And the caterpillar asked her if she liked the size she was just then. And Alice said she would like to be just a little bit larger. 3 inches was such a wretched height to be. Just mark off 3 inches on the wall. About this much. About the length of your middle finger. Oh, so you see the middle finger. And you'll see what size she was. And the caterpillar told her one side of the mushroom would make her grow taller, and the other side would make her grow shorter. So Alice took 2 little bits of it with her to nibble, and managed to make herself quite a nice, comfortable height before she went on to visit the Duchess. And tomorrow we will see how that visit went. Good night.